Welcome. This special board meeting of the Poway Unified School District Board of Education is now in session at 6 o'clock. It's July 20th, 2016. And we will start our agenda off with item A, public comment. Because this is a special board meeting, the board will hear public comments on agenda items only. So if you'd like to speak on a non-agenda item, you'll have to wait for one of our regular board meetings. So Clerk Patapow, do we have any comment cards?
Madam President, before we go to public comment, I'd like to move to pull item D1 from the agenda.
I would second that.
Any discussion on this?
Some rationale will be helpful.
Yeah. I have three specific issues with it. One is that I'm not comfortable going forward with discussing or filling this position until the new interim superintendent comes on board. The second is that we can't fill a position that doesn't exist yet. We'd have to create it first. And the third is that I'm concerned about real and potential conflicts of interest, real vis-a-vis filling the position with someone who may already be in a position with the district that facilitated the docketing of the item, or absent that, just the perception that this being done in closed session is not transparent.
And just to dial back, the board has been given no backup information on this, so I'm not exactly sure what this is. I'm just concerned that it's not properly docketed for closed session, but it's not clear to me exactly what we're doing and why it's on the docket. Could the President provide more information?
I'm going to add that I ran this through council. This is docketed just fine, and I would like to talk about any issues you might have with it in closed session. So I'm not going to support pulling this.
Well, the problem is there's no, what is the Brown Act code that allows it to be discussed in closed session? There's no reference to the Brown Act.
This is a personnel exemption.
Okay, so there's a position, acting deputy superintendent. It's a position that does not currently exist in the district.
Job descriptions exist.
So job descriptions for an acting deputy superintendent?
For a deputy superintendent, yes.
Well, that job description, are you talking about the one that I put forward that was docketed in open session, in which the board had an open 45-minute discussion regarding that deputy?
No, there isn't. There are two existing job descriptions, a certificated and a classified.
Okay, so and you're saying there's a job description for a deputy superintendent or for an acting deputy superintendent?
There would never be a job description for an acting anything. It's for the deputy superintendent. Acting would be something that we could talk about in closed session.
Okay, but we don't currently have that position filled right now, correct? The deputy superintendent?
That's correct.
So we're discussing a position that does not exist?
No one is filling that position currently. That's correct.
Okay, so it sounds like we're discussing, the board needs to have a discussion as to whether or not we want to bring this position back in the same way. Well, when that was done for the creation of the proposal to create the deputy business administrator position, that was done in open session. If we're discussing a job description and whether or not we want to create a position, that needs to be done in open session.
Ms. Beaty, this position already exists. There are two different versions of this position, and we could fill it anytime we'd like to. We would need to, again, as I explained to Mr. Sellers when he asked about it, we would absolutely need to fill it officially in open session by a vote of the board with public comment.
Your answer to Mr. Sellers' question as to what this docket item was is that the topic has come up numerous times informally. Can you elaborate on that?
No, I cannot. I would be happy to elaborate on that in closed session. This is a personnel issue. I'm not going to talk about it in open session at this time.
Well, this lacks transparency. who had informal discussions.
Transparency
I
would,
didn't.
Ms. Beaty, I'm happy to remind you about the discussion and anything that we talked, not right now. I told you this is appropriate for closed session as a personnel issue, not in open session until and unless we make an appointment. It would be public. There would be a vote in a public session, open public
vote
session at
on
a
what?
regular meeting.
It sounds like you have information that the rest of the board members don't have. So what is the information? This lacks transparency. We've been given no information as to what this position is, who's interested in filling it, why we're not discussing it in open session, why we're not floating this position. What is going on? Why haven't we been given any information on this?
If there's any other discussion on this, I'm happy to hear it. Otherwise, I'd like to take a vote on the motion. Mr. Sellers.
It's just a technical question, and I guess the only one in the audience who could answer it is Ms. Medina, which is that in docketing items in closed session, are we not required to cite the Ed Code section that gives us exception to the Brown Act? Well, okay, this looks like Ed Code, but okay, Government Code section that gives us exception to the Brown Act to discuss the item in closed session.
Mr. Sellers, this item is directly from an attorney's advised listing of it. We don't need Ms. Medina to answer this question. I've already checked with counsel. And I'd like to call the vote at this time. All in favor of the motion to remove this item from the docket?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Nay. The motion fails with Mr. Sellers and Ms. Beaty voting aye, Mr. Patapow, Mr. Zane, Ms. O'Connor-Ratcliffe voting no. Any other motions here before we begin? I'd like to start with public comment then. Mr. Patapow.
Start with the leadership goals. Gabrielle? Sorry, Gabrielle down? Gabrielle?
Thank you,
Better.
Gabriella.
Okay,
Or Gabby.
I get it right.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Gabriella Dow, and I'm the mom of two children. One is going into 4th grade, and one is going into 6th grade. And I wanted to thank the full board for the actions that they took, which must have been difficult, but once the audit was made public, seemed overdue and has been absolutely shocking to the community. And I did want to specifically thank Board Member Beaty. I think it was truly, I think that it was in May, about a year and a half ago, that I attended my first board meeting for the school district to bring a flyer for our trail run, and was just surprised to see teachers booing the board member. It was Ms. Beaty whenever she would speak. There was a lot of just very ugly language that was coming from the audience. It seemed like there was chaos with the superintendent and the discussion that was being had up at the dais. And I think all of us as a community just want to see those days behind us. Certainly these are the early steps to get there, but the kids don't have years and years to wait for this. My family personally has made the decision to take the kids out of Poway Unified School District and into a public charter school in a different school district. We did not know how things would be resolved at the time. There were some other things that went into that decision. Our son skipping a grade was a part of it, and we didn't want to push him into middle school. But frankly, it just wasn't a place that we felt was the right fit for our kids right now. But we absolutely want to come back. Again, we bought our house in Poway Unified School District. We moved to Rancho Bernardo because of the school district. We love all the people here, our friends. The teachers at Valley Elementary have been amazing. They did kindergarten and preschool at Chaparral. The families, the teachers there have been amazing. And so we don't have a lot of time to pull it all together and to really do right by the kids. And so, again, I want everybody to acknowledge what Board Member Beaty did. I think I say that because I experienced some of what she went through. When I did the right thing, I thought, and came forward and tried to inform people about the data breach and tried to make sure that parents would be notified and that the board and the district was aware of how serious an issue it was and try to figure out why it happened. So it's not a comfortable position to be in. It takes real leadership. I'm grateful for that. And I hope that all of the adults in this room, the community has a big role to play as well to help everybody come together again. Please let us know as a community how we can start to be smart, be safe, but do right by the kids. And so that's the main thing I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Dale, for taking the time.
Our next speaker is Jeanette Latang.
Hi, I'm Janet Latang, and I'm here tonight just to talk a little bit about the strategic leadership goals. And as a member last year and this coming year on the District Advisory Council, I'd just like to remind you that the LCAP, I think, provides excellent strategic leadership goals for all of us at PUSD. So I hope that we'll take that into consideration. I'm not sure why we're meeting tonight on strategic leadership goals, so I just thought I'd bring that up and say, hey, we have this 140-page document which had community input, staff input, administration input, student input. So I'd like to make sure that we remember what the work we had that went into there, and those are goals for the next 3 years, and I think they're excellent goals. So also, just like to bring up fiscal responsibility, I also think is another excellent goal to keep in mind. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is John Riley.
Hello, my name is John Riley. I live at, are we supposed to say our address still, or is that still a common practice? Okay, I live in Poway. I'm here as a citizen mostly to say thank you. Thank you for making the bold decision to push forward a change in leadership in this school district. In my opinion, our previous superintendent never should have had his contract renewed back in 2014, strictly on the basis of the capital appreciation bonds. And I was there that March evening upstairs when his contract was renewed, and Ms. Beaty, you spoke out on a 4-to-1 vote, and I applaud you for that. I would also like to say that I think this is a wonderful opportunity for everybody here and for the district at large to start anew. When there is a change in leadership, and frankly, a change in the second layer of the org chart, I'm looking up there at the photo gallery, it's a great opportunity to change culture and to really make significant changes in policy. Again, Ms. Beaty, I read your op-ed in the Voice of San Diego today. Many of the suggestions you have are a very good template for the board to consider to move forward, to put in those controls so that we don't see an egregious theft of taxpayer dollars occurring. So I think this is a great opportunity to implement this because there's going to be new leadership, there'll be a new superintendent, and a new opportunity for change. Speaking further, I think there's a wonderful opportunity for the board, for the 5 of you. We read in the media the votes frequently come down to 3 versus 2. It just happened a moment ago. It doesn't have to be that way. I think we can move forward to an era of 5 versus 0. I think from my observation, many of the challenges and the drama that have been, I think we're all aware of it, much of it has been directly or indirectly connected to our previous superintendent. And so I think once we turn the page and start anew, I'm hoping that we'll be able to find greater unity as a board and the community with the board. And we all collectively can be kind of rowing the boat in the same direction. Now, I spoke here a few weeks ago about the structural budget deficits that are occurring. And there's going to be a need to make some significant spending cuts. I think we're looking at $18 million a year for the next fiscal year. That is going to require a unified front, in my opinion, without division, so that it looks like there's a comprehensive plan that's embraced across the board. And I encourage a positive move forward for fiscal responsibility and saving taxpayer dollars. So thank you.
Steve Dowell.
Hello, everyone. Mr. Riley just stole my thunder, I think. I really just wanted to thank you. I've come here several times, lodging complaints that I think are justified, but, that being the case, I wanted to make sure I came here and thanked you. I think what you did was important and necessary. Not, unfortunate, certainly, but I think it's the right decision. I appreciate you doing it. And just to echo what everyone else has said, too, this is an opportunity for us to really live up to our reputation, and we're looking to you guys as leaders to help us do that. Thank you very much.
Kim Garnier.
Hello, I'm Kim Garnier. I came here today hoping to see a unified board. We are on a path of great change, and I was feeling optimistic until I stepped in and heard the first few moments of dialogue. No one can deny that Trustee Beaty has been right for years, and the board majority failed to listen to her. Thankfully, we also had Trustee Sellers join the board, and he has also been correct. And I still see 3 people digging their heels in the sand. Trustee Zane, I saw your interview on TV, and maybe you misspoke, but you said that John Collins was with POSD for 8 years, and I thought, please tell me that was just a misstatement, because he's been here so much longer, and if you don't know that, and I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, but people in this community signed a petition asking Board President Michelle O'Connor Radcliffe to step down and for Trustee Sellers to take over. And I hoped that after the board came together that wouldn't be necessary, but I still see the infighting. It's obvious to the community. I think we need to put our egos aside and start anew. And what I saw here just in the first few minutes, it doesn't seem like that's the case. There were warning signs for years and the board failed to act. We still have a lot of trouble. A lot of people still need to be held accountable. And as of right now, as far as I know, Dan Shinoff still represents Poway Unified. And again, Trustee Beaty and Trustee Sellers have spoken out against Dan Shinoff. There's a list a mile long of reasons why he shouldn't be representing Poway Unified. And I'm wondering what steps the board will take and how long it will take to act. Collins was here way too long. Is Shinoff going to be around any longer? What about the legal mistakes he's made thus far? It's time for change, and I hope that the attitudes can change of the board majority. Trustee Zane is Republican. We're counting on you for fiscal responsibility. But right now, again, it goes to Trustee Beaty and Trustee Sellers, who have been overseeing the accountability and transparency for our district. And the community is just giving them a standing ovation. And they're looking to the 3 of you and waiting for you guys to fall in line behind these 2 people who have been right all along. Thank you.
Chris Garnier.
Good evening, Board. How are you? It's a pleasure, honestly. It's a pleasure to be here. All 5 of you, I want to say thank you for making a difficult decision. It absolutely was a challenging decision to get rid of Superintendent Collins, and I have been frustrated and angry with you, Mr. Patapow, you, Mr. Zane, and you, Miss Michelle O'Connor Radcliffe for some time now, because I've been coming here telling you exactly the problems of John Collins. And it was as if I was some kind of crazy animal, some kind of threat. And even to this day, myself as the Vice President of the National Network, and we have our President of the National, Reverend Harris, with us, we still have asked you, ma'am, for a meeting. And either there's something seriously, you either didn't understand what your vote meant for getting rid of John Collins, or there's some kind of bigotry truly in your heart. And I can't believe that. I look back and I see Ed O'Connor, who was my teacher. who's your dad, one of my favorite teachers. Ma'am, we've talked about restraining orders being falsely placed on people, something that John Collins has done. We came here peacefully, asking, begging, just to speak, have a conversation with you, to be part of that conversation as you pick the new superintendent. So you talk to black people in the community to help this achievement gap decrease. Just a conversation, ma'am. I don't know how many times I have to ask. We've got our family here. There either some kind of bigotry in your heart or you don't quite grasp, ma'am, what your vote meant to get rid of John Collins. And he's gone now. And in our family, it was a joyous occasion. The angels sang. And I'm going to be a kinder, gentler Chris Garnier now that he's gone. To Trustee Beaty and Trustee Sellers, especially you, ma'am, my hat goes off to you. When no one listened to you, ma'am, you continually fought for what was right. Your righteousness, ma'am, is remarkable. And I'm so grateful to you, Mr. Charles Sellers, Trustee Sellers, for hearing what Trustee Beaty was saying and jumping on her side and backing her. And as my wife so eloquently said, there's still in-house bickering. You just got rid of the most disgraced superintendent in the history of our community, and you're still bickering. It's still 3-2. Thank you so much, Kimberly Beaty and Charles Sellers. Your leadership is beyond reproach. Thank you.
Reverend Shane Harris.
Hello, board, and thank you once again for having us here and having me here. As the president of the National Action Network, I certainly want to, we don't get into politicians. We really stay clear of politicians and stay focused on issues. But I certainly do want to give a hand to Kimberly Beaty and Charles Sellers for their work on exposing the injustice going on with the superintendent and him continually basically stealing the people's money. I want to give them a hand. Thank you. And let me say this as we talk about moving forward, and I certainly see the President, Michelle O'Connor Ratcliffe, and TJ Zane, and Andy, and Kimberly, and Charles. My goal in coming tonight is to first let you know that I'm still in the mix. Just because I'm not at the meetings doesn't mean that I'm not. We've got a county-wide effort, National Action Network, so doesn't mean that I'm not in the mix. We certainly do have Poway members and Escondido members of National Action Network who are here, who are informing me daily of what's going on. What's important to us is that now that you got rid of the superintendent who was stealing the people's money, and that has been exposed, let's do the next step and get rid of Shinoff. Let's get rid of this law firm that is stealing the taxpayers' money because he's failing on cases continually. We've seen him kicked out of San Ysidro. Let's do the same thing in Poway. Let's make the right decision and let's get rid of Shinoff. Secondly, we came here a couple weeks ago and Kim Garnier's mother was told that we could not attend because this is private property. It was during work hours between 9 to 5, and it was about 1 o'clock in the evening that this was private property. We could not attend. I would appreciate that we, number one, that we would not be treated that way when we come on the premises. There were other people walking in and out of these doors. So that's got to be dealt with, and I don't know what's going on up here at the front desk, what's going on inside during the day, but there's truly some issues with the service to the community here, and we've experienced that. Finally, Michelle O'Connor Ratcliffe, I demand that you meet with me in the National Action Network to build a bridge. Now that the superintendent is gone, let's get a community process of selecting the next superintendent. Let's work together. We can build bridges and get rid of the walls. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our public comment. Thank you all very much for your comments. Our second item, strategic leadership goals. This is the board and acting superintendent, Dr. Robertson, and our future superintendent, Mr. Velasquez. Oh, and I'd like to invite you up here to the microphone. We'd like to discuss our expectations and goals. Please have a seat. So I was hoping to move to closed session by 7:30. We may have to push it at this point, but I would like to try to allot maybe 30 to 45 minutes to this item. I've done quite a bit of research over the past week on how interim superintendents, acting superintendents successfully prepare districts for their next permanent superintendent. And the main categories seem to be, first, to fill that leadership void that's left when a longtime leader leaves. The second is to take care of the district's people, try to heal some of the stress on our system that's been caused by the last few months of uncertainty, and certainly we've had quite a lot of that. Attending to the needs of our staff who've been impacted by the departure of our outgoing leader who's been here a long time, and working on the organizational culture. The third thing is cleanup, and we have a lot of that to do. We need to resolve some existing issues before the board hires that permanent superintendent, and I hope that our acting and interim superintendents will be able to help with that. Managing some necessary changes in order to prepare our district for the effective entry of the new superintendent. And I think that that's probably the area where we can have the most discussion tonight. And the fourth is to sustain our district's current direction and our mission, what we're doing right, while using your own experiences, both of you have a lot of it, to make improvements where you see the necessity for that. And I think we can talk about that quite a bit too, but I did want to give a nod to Janet Letang. Certainly our maintaining the direction we're in certainly involves sticking with our current LCAP goals. They're great goals, and we have quite a ways to go to reach them. So those are good goals. We just approve them. We want to make sure that our interim superintendent and our acting superintendent are on board helping us to reach those goals, and they are good goals. So I think those are places to start. Given those four things, I would like to start with identifying things that need cleaning up, because again, I think this is one of the areas. Internal controls, obviously we have a lot of these problems addressed in our audit report. Some PRA processes that need cleaning up, our IT issues. I'd like to approach some IBPS training as soon as possible to aid with our ongoing negotiations. It's likely that, well, we should have a goal to continue our negotiations with staff, and our bargaining units this time, we would normally be finished by the end of the year, maybe quite a bit sooner, and I don't think that it would behoove us to pause overly long on that. So I would like to see that happening too. And I think those internal controls, there's a lot to talk about there, and I do want to open it up to that. But let me finish with that fourth. To sustain our district's current mission and direction, it makes sense to take a look at the LCAP goals and make sure, Dr. Robertson helped played the main role in bringing those together for the board to look at all of the community's interests. But our governance calendar has a lot on it that I think that you as the new interim superintendent should be aware of as well, that we should discuss also. So, and when we're done, I want to make sure that I try to summarize everything that everyone said so that Dr. Robertson and Mr. Velasquez both have a really firm idea of what we've said, and we can kind of bring it together and have a good list here for moving forward. And I'm obviously interested in hearing from you as well, what you think that you can do for us going forward to reach these, and any other ideas you have, as well as from you, Dr. Robertson. But at this time, I guess I'd like to open it up to some of those internal controls. Again, I've already noted some of the things addressed in the audit report, but I would like to add right here to revoke all delegations of board duties that we had previously passed or prior boards had passed to the superintendent. And perhaps this board was not even aware of some of the things, those delegations that prior boards had made, that we were kind of unknowingly going along with at this point. So I would like to see us revoke all of those delegations at this point. And if we need to make them again going forward, we can do that if it makes sense. But at this point, I think we should assume that we've revoked everything, and we can give it back if there's a really good reason. But at this point, we need to have all of our powers in the board at this point, I think. So I would like to open this up here, though. And again, I'd like to stick right now with some of that area of cleanup that we'd like to see our interim and acting superintendent undertake in the time that they're going to be with us. If anybody wants to make some comments. I have a long list, but I've spoken here for a little while in introducing this. So, Mr. Zane, you want to jump in? Mr. Padpat? Oh, okay. I saw your mic down, but no? Okay. Mr. Sellers, it looks like it's you now.
It seems to me this would be an opportune moment for Mr. Velasquez to make a few remarks regarding what you've just said, because you covered a lot of ground. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good starting point.
I get the nod?
Mr. Velasquez, please.
Thank you, President O'Connor-Ratcliffe. I want to thank you for scheduling this board meeting. It was a request I made to you. And I want to thank the board as well for their confidence and the opportunity to serve both the community, the students, the board, and all of the civic groups here in Poway. From what I've heard, the goal is to heal, to move forward. There's nothing we can do to change the past. That's done. But there's a lot we can do for the future. And I, as an individual, cannot accomplish as much with a team. And I use that team approach. And I welcome Dr. Robinson and Dr. Wessel, working with them, and the board and the community as well. It also ties in what we're talking about, and this is the main reason for the board meeting, is to talk about the search. It is really important that we begin that process, because it'll take about 3 months if we do this in a timely manner, in a thorough manner. And it's something we got to talk about, because part of the process of doing a search, and just for the information of the community and to the board, I have worked for a search firm for 2 years. I have done over 8 searches in the state of California, 1 in Arizona. Very familiar with all the firms that are here in California and the process they use, and basically all the same. Part of the process to get the input and to get the stakeholders' input and get that to information to the board, which then will give you information on these goals you're talking about. The goals are not about LCAP. I'm sure Dr. Robinson did a great job. So we're not here to discuss LCAP. That is a document. It's a living document. It can be addressed as the permanent superintendent comes in if there's going to be any changes, and go through the process appropriately by including the community. Mm-hmm. So again, I just want to thank the board. I want to thank the community. I'm here for the kids. And I want to do the best job I can to ensure that there's a quality education, a safe environment, and that there is accountability. Because without those 3 items, there's no trust. And if we don't have trust, then we're doomed. So let's build the trust. And one of the goals I have first week as I get here is to meet individually with each board member, to hear from you personally, without me sharing what I learned from each of you to each other. Sometimes it's better just to get that out. Let's call it therapy in a sense, and we move forward. I really, just as in kids, I don't believe there are bad boards. I just believe sometimes information is not getting to like it should. And I don't want to blame anyone. Again, I don't want to go to the past. What I do want to is start going forward and doing the healing process and start building this trust. And I know it can get done. So that's what I have to say. No.
And we will get to our next item, in fact, when we finish talking about our goals for the next few months, and when we have interims and acting superintendents here, is to talk about the search. So yeah, we will get to that one. But for now, I'd like to stick to the goals. Unless we're already done with it, I'm happy to move on to see if we're done.
Well, I'm wondering if it would be best to, as Mr. Velasquez recommended, for him to schedule these meetings, individual meetings with board members, and get the input, and then come back as a body and discuss our goals. In that way, Mr. Velasquez is also apprised of some of the issues, and it just seems like maybe that's a good way to go, just to postpone that conversation.
I think conversations about goals should be ongoing, and we can have this conversation over and over and over again, and we probably should as things change, and yeah, we get to know each other and address certain things. But I think it's important at this point to lay out some of our goals as a board currently, what they are. And I think the audit report spells out several, and I don't think there's any reason to wait to talk about some of those.
Okay, well, the number one goal is for us to start our superintendent search. I mean, I think that's imperative. I think everything else falls in line after that. I think that has to be the priority. So I think that we should move to discussing that.
Does anyone else have anything under item B to Mr. Patapau?
I disagree with Ms. Beaty as far as the superintendent is primary. I think our primary goal at this point is opening up the schools for this year. And I think my feeling is, rather than after meeting with the staff and finding out their needs to make a successful school opening, then you could meet with us. But primarily, I'm thinking, you made a statement that you're for the kids. Okay, here's where the kids come in. Are we ready for school? Does the staff need anything? How can you help the staff make a smooth transition for the next year? You can always meet with the board. I'm open to that anytime, but that's my primary goal.
Mr. Zane.
Good evening, Dr. Velasquez. Thanks for being here this evening. 4 things I picked up on what you said I'm really happy to hear. I think it probably resonated with everyone in the room. Your focus, you said your goal is to heal and move forward. You're a believer in the team approach. You're here for the kids, something we haven't heard a lot of, with the exception of a few individuals here and there over the year. And the importance of trust. And I think that even in internal conversations, that comes up in public comment, that comes up in internal conversations, that is something that needs to be built upon, not just between the board and the superintendent or the interim superintendent, the acting, whatever the case may be, amongst board members, between the board members and the public. I think that is huge. And so I think to the extent that you're in a position to help facilitate healing and moving forward and building trust, you will have gone a long way and done a great service to the district. I am interested to hear, maybe even if it's just superficially, you might have noticed we've been in the news as of late a little bit. What are your opinions? What do you see as some fundamental or structural, if structural problems at the district currently? And have you started to formulate any ideas for addressing those?
First of all, let me start by, I don't believe, hi media. The media does a good job.
He's a tough interviewer, huh?
The media does a good job, but it's hard for me because I have been around the media, both as a law enforcement officer and an educator as a superintendent. And, they take some creative use of words at times and processes. But that being said, they do a good job, and they try to get things factual. And I don't like to comment until I find out what exactly is going on. I've read what's happening in the media. There's some issues I can, expound upon, such as some of the blogs and some of the media issues with your bonds, your cabs, the infighting with the board. I'm not going to get involved with or make comment towards what has happened with the former superintendent. I don't think that's appropriate. But what I do want to do and comment in terms of your question, Mr. Zane, is that to get a better understanding of the issues that each of you have and that you have collectively, as well as meeting with the community. And I know there's going to be similarities. And I know they're going to be, for example, I can tell you right now, people want to move forward. They don't want the negativism. They want things to be positive. They want to see the board's leadership collectively. Doesn't mean you always have to do a 5-0, but you respect each other and you move forward with the decisions that are made. It's a democracy, and we follow that. My responsibility is not that of a permanent superintendent. If I was to come here permanently, I'm talking about 3-5 plans of action, strategic plans. Meeting with the board, having a strategic plan session, meeting with the principals, meeting with the community, and seeing how that all fits. And that takes years. My job as the interim is to start the process, is to try to take some of the big ticket items that are issues festering out there and try to get them resolved so that as we transition to a permanent superintendent, it can take some things off the plate. And that's what I hope to accomplish. I need more information. Bottom line, it's not a political shoving it off and answer. It's really an honest answer in the sense that I hear this, I hear that, but it's hearsay. I really want to get the facts. And even with the facts, sometimes it's between here and there, and somewhere in the middle is the truth. And we just move forward on that. You guys are a great team. You have a fantastic district. We also have to remember to focus on the positive things going on. I'm not saying it's perfect, but there are some great things going on. Let's focus on that. Let's tell the community, but at the same time, let's correct some of those things that you as a board would like to see changed. I looked at your board policies. Some they need to be revised.
Well, let me interrupt you right there. There we have a policy development workshop, September 14th, 15th, and 16th. This is a huge deal for us, and we need to revise many of our policies. And there are some that are missing that we certainly need to develop something in some areas. So the whole point of that, well, that's been needed for some time, and we do have it scheduled at this point, and that's something that you'll be on board at that time, and that'll be quite a heavy burden on staff for a little while there, and the board will be involved as well, obviously heavily involved. So yeah, that's something to have on your calendar, certainly.
But just put it down here.
Yeah, get it in there now. 14, 15, 16. Yeah.
While we're on that topic, I just do want to just make a note that we want to make sure and agendize those as board workshops so that more than 2 board members can attend any given day over the course of the 3 days.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, given that, again, I think that's probably one of the more important things on our governance calendar, but we will certainly make sure we get you a copy of our LCAP, of our governance calendar. And again, I think in your interview, the board talked to you about some of the perceived fires in the district that we really need to work on putting out. And a lot of that is there's work underway, but we need to make sure that continues, and your leadership, of course, will be helpful. And I'm just talking to you at this time, but Dr. Robertson is in charge here for another month or so, and that's it. Oh, no, not a month. A few weeks. Oh, boy. Yes, so that work is underway, but we do expect that to continue, and we want to make sure we take care of those as quickly as possible. And if that can be resolved before a new superintendent comes on, all the better. It makes that transition much smoother. Mr. Zane.
This isn't so much of a question for Dr. Velasquez in as much as it is to you. You brought out some strategic leadership goals, the revision of some internal controls, cleaning up. We know our PRA process is flawed. Our IT department has issues that need addressing. Our IBPS training, we can certainly use that. And I think that, well, maybe one thing that is I can say for Dr. Velasquez is certainly ensuring that our bargaining unit negotiations do not get stalled over the intervening 3 months between now and when it is that we identify a permanent superintendent. But I am curious, do you have an enumeration or a listing of some of those board delegations that were previously given to the superintendent, or is that something that we're going to pick up as part of the board policy revisions in September.
I did have a couple of things that did occur to me and that we've come across in the audit report and in recent discussions with the board, but I think some of those, as we've discovered, we weren't even aware that those duties had been delegated. So I think at this point it's very important for us to say, we've delegated nothing. Don't come at us and say, but you delegated that, because as of right now, I would like us to agree that we have delegated nothing. Is the board with me on that? Because I think we really need to establish what duties we have and take back some of those powers that the board had delegated in the past and make sure that we understand what we've delegated and why we've delegated it and know that it was appropriate.
Do we know if those are enumerated anywhere other than the ones that were easily identifiable through the audit or we stumbled upon?
I think that was our problem, that we didn't know. And I think that's easily resolved by pulling them all back. Anything that's out there, we revoke it.
Well, I don't think there was delegation. I mean, the board is guided by laws, and those laws are policies. So if it's not in the policy as a delegation, it hasn't been delegated. Whether it was claimed to be a delegation was quite a different matter. So I don't see this as an issue.
Okay, so I'm not hearing anybody who's disagreeing with, let's just make that statement right now, anything that any board at any time has ever delegated or any member of the cabinet or staff believes that was delegated is no longer the case as of tonight. Okay, great.
I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about. Anything else that wasn't codified in policy? Is that what you're saying?
I think that we've come across plenty of things now where there was a claim that had been delegated by a prior board, and we had nothing. We had no way of knowing that it was delegated.
You're talking about any verbal claim?
Yeah, anything that may have been in writing previously but isn't anymore, or there was no.
Can you cite some examples? Because this just seems very amorphous.
We talked about it in closed session regarding legal actions.
Well, it can be, so what are can you cite the examples?
No, we've talked about it in closed session. I'm not comfortable talking about it in open session at this time, but I'm happy to.
Well, delegated duties wouldn't come under a closed session confidentiality requirement.
Ms. Beaty, you're not arguing that we shouldn't, that we should have delegated duties. You're just arguing that there were no duties delegated, so this is unnecessary?
Well, I'm not arguing. I'm just asking a question. What are you referring to?
We've talked about it in closed session, and I'm not comfortable talking about it in open session at this time. But
so you're talking about delegated duties that were all considered confidential?
Do you not recollect, or do you want?
Well,
should we talk about this in closed session at another date? Then it's not agendized for tonight's closed session, but I'm happy to try to remind you at a later date in a later meeting.
You are positing that we revoke any and all delegated duties to the superintendent. I'm asking for just one example. They're all confidential and can't be disclosed?
No, I just told you we had spoken in closed session regarding some of the legal duties. Legal action.
So is that all I'm just trying to have an understanding of exactly what we are revoking. So we're revoking legal delegation of legal duties. Is that what this is confined to?
That would be one of them. No, I said all of them. Okay. Anything that anyone might believe that we had ever delegated in the past.
Would it be adequate or sufficient to say that the interim superintendent is only authorized to act on existing board policies?
Absolutely, yes.
Nothing beyond that?
Yes, and there is no cause at any time to say, well, the board delegated that authority. Because as of today, we have delegated nothing. Okay. Because the number of times we've heard, well, the board delegated that authority is more than one hand, certainly.
What's your comment on that?
Well, thank you, sir. I'm trying to understand the authority, and I agree with the president. If something was discussed in closed session, do not speak of it in open. I think at this point, the way I operate is my board policy, Ed Code, Penal Code, Welfare and Institution Code, Business Code, and any other code that's out there. And that is a recommendation I make that all staff members operate under because it keeps us safe and it creates transparency. So as a board, I would really like the opportunity again is to speak to you to get further understanding what's going on and to be able to comment on this and to guide us forward. Because I think you're both saying the same thing. I just think it needs clarification, but you can't do it right now.
Yeah, and perhaps then we will docket this as a closed session item at a future meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it is important that you understand and everyone understand. Yeah.
And I think you all have different interpretations of what's going on here. So that's why it's real critical that I meet with you individually as well sometime in the future with the understanding that kids are a priority. And that's another reason we have an assistant super, an associate super of instruction, because that will be the first question when I come on board is, are we prepared to open schools? We have staffing done? Cafeteria, have they been notified? How are the bus transportation routes? Our special education students, have they been looked at? How are we doing with materials and supplies, our textbooks? Having a meeting with site, not only administration, but talking to teachers. So obviously.
Dr. Robertson, anything to add on this? Because it seems like we're about ready to move on to item C.
Not at this time, President O'Connor. I'm good. I understand the process, and as soon as we can get together and start to meet and we can get our work together, I think we'll be able to address some of these, and I can let Mr. Velasquez know where we've gone so far. All right?
Okay. Sounds good. Then with that, unless there... Oh, Mr. Zane.
Nothing related to item B, but before we get to item C, if I may, because there really isn't an appropriate place for this in the agenda this evening. It's not a regular meeting, it's a special. But I did notice that earlier this evening, there's 3 scouts from Boy Scout Troop 648 in Rancho Penasquitos that came in to fulfill part of their requirements for a communication merit badge. Very familiar with Troop 648. I spent a week at Camp Meriwether in Oregon a few weeks ago with a couple of these scouts back there. And so I wanted to welcome them to the meeting and thank them for being here and witnessing the process at hand.
I hope you boys got more sleep than Mr. Zane did. All right, yes, welcome, and thanks for being here. So moving on to item C then, this is our superintendent search item. So the board and our current acting superintendent and our future interim superintendent will discuss a superintendent search. We have talked now about how we'd like our interim and acting superintendent to prepare the district a little bit for our next superintendent. So now time to talk about finding that person, how we're going to go about doing that. So step one, I hope we can all agree that we need to hire a search firm to do an external search. And this is in accordance with board policy 1.7, 1.7.1. And thank you to Ms. McDowell for forwarding that along. Are we all in agreement on that? I'm seeing nodding heads down. Okay, great. So at this time, I see step 2 as requesting an RFP for a search firm. And I would suggest to the board that we ask Associate Superintendent Hueso to do that and work directly with the board on creating that. I hope that she could create that RFP and submit it to the board for approval within about a week. And I know that the County Office of Ed has samples of those. But I would like that RFP to be submitted to a subcommittee of the board for approval before it goes out. If the whole board wishes to look at it, we can always call another special, though I would prefer a subcommittee to look that over and approve the RFP before it goes out. And also, I've gathered up a list of some firm names. I guess the kind of the usual suspects, and it sounds like future interim superintendent, Mr. Velasquez, also probably knows the usual suspects and a few more, I'm guessing. And to assign to Ms. Hueso also to add to that list, and obviously any board member who has a name and wants to do some research and submit names. Also with the of course understanding that the RFP should be posted as usual and open to any other search firm that wants to apply. But I've also heard that those RFPs are pretty short time frames, about 10 days. So we can expect a pretty fast turnaround, I have been told. So that does put us around mid-August at that time, where the board would receive all proposals that come in and read through them all. And then we would need a meeting to interview and select that search firm, and that would have to be an open session. That could be at a special meeting, but it would need to be an open session. We could offer our interview questions ahead of time and do it. Well, there are a lot of people who can help us with how to do that, and I'm assuming Mr. Velasquez is one of them. So that's where I'd like to, and once we get some of those back, kind of take our timeline a little bit at least from what those firms who are putting in their proposals tell us. Obviously, we have some say in that as well, but what these firms tell us they can do for us is important. I'm hoping that we can get to that. Are we in agreement that we want to put out this RFP as soon as possible?
Does the direction to staff to prepare and issue an RFP require a motion? Or is that just given direction?
I don't think it does. I think, yeah, we just give direction as a board to do that.
Okay.
Correct? Yes. Okay. Correct. Any comments on giving direction to Ms. Hueso to do this?
I have a question. I wanted to ask Mr. Velasquez, does this comport with the normal process for doing this, since you've done it a lot more than we have?
No, and again, President O'Connor Ratcliffe, you did an excellent job in doing the research. The search firms are prepared to give the RFQ. Okay, they have those documents, and what that includes is the history of the searches they've done, the costs of the district this size, the process they use to go through the search, and information about the company. They're prepared, they're ready, those can go out. My thought is if you have Dr. Wessel contact these firms and tell them they want the proposals, they can send them the next day. They FedEx them, they get them. So if you give them 5 days, that's plenty of time.
10 is long then.
Yeah,
Okay.
10 is long.
Oh.
Give them 5 days. Once you have the proposals and we get them to the board for review and we set up a time for the public interviews where you interview them in public session.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's appropriate after that is to go into closed session, have a discussion, come out and open and do your vote and make a determination to move forward. Once you move forward and I've selected a search firm, the process begins, and it's 2 streets going down at the same time. One is working with the board to develop the characteristics to create a brochure and an advertisement, and the other one is to set up the times to meet with stakeholders to get their input. And then we ask staff and we ask the board, what groups do you want the search firm to interview to get their input? Then a document's created that's given to the board that has all the information of all of the stakeholders. And that also establishes goals. Well, you'll see some commonalities that occur and gives you a sense of where the community is. Now, I'm going to say this, and I don't want the community to get mad at me. It is the role of the Board of Education to hire the superintendent. I've had many times where stakeholder groups want to be part of the interview process. They want to be part of what the board's responsibility is. And I say, you guys have the input, but it is the board's responsibility to hire this individual. So that being said, it usually takes about 3 months. Sometimes it'll be a little longer, based on the availability of boards, and it's going to require some special board meetings.
Absolutely, and it's good to hear you kind of echo what I had done in my research on 3 months. Actually, is very fast for what I had heard, though, and what I had read. So I guess it's possible.
and one of the reasons is I can assist because I've been on the other side. So I can help the board through the process of the characteristics you want to find and get those into the brochure and get some of the other information that's important to the brochure. Why would somebody from Northern California want to work in Poway? Well, I get all the attributes of why Poway is great and why they want to come down here and work here. So.
And we've done that before here in Poway.
Oh, so you've got it.
Yeah. Okay.
I have one minor clarification. You mentioned an RFQ, and the president mentioned an RFP.
The request for qualifications versus a proposal. They have the proposals done, so really what you're looking at the qualifications of the firm. You have national firms and you have state firms that only work in the state of California. There's basically 3 national firms: Rain Associates, McPherson and Jacobson, and Hazard, Young and Atina. Those are the big 3. Now, you may not want to go national, but you may want to focus on somebody who has the skill set and knows California. But many times there's somebody who worked in California as a superintendent, went out of state, and has a desire to come back, is familiar with the California rules. So that's something the board has to think about when you want to either do a national firm or you want to do a state firm.
So is this something then we would put this out right away because it's just a simple RFQ?
Yeah, basically that you just call the firms and ask them for a proposal.
And then, so then the next step would be the meeting where they're interviewed by the board, because the board president had put forward the idea of a subcommittee, or do we just have them all come forward?
Yeah, I would recommend that the proposals, they'll send enough proposals for each board member, and it gives you an opportunity to look at it and do your own vetting. And then we come together as a group, and then we make a determination on, after we have a discussion.
And when you say vetting, we take, if there's a certain, we just limit the number that we invite to the interviews?
No, they'll all come and do a presentation.
Oh, I see.
You'll hear them all do a presentation.
And just to clarify, the subcommittee would be to approve the RFQ before it goes out, not to approve who we interview. We would get all of the applicants.
Do we need to go through that step?
You don't need to, but maybe one thing you may want that subcommittee to look at is who do you want to request a proposal from?
I think we just open it up. So I think as long as we're willing to open it up to any search firm, there probably isn't a necessity of, we could skip that step.
When you say by who do you want to accept a proposal from, do you want to just limit it to California-based search firms versus national?
Correct.
I would be in favor of just opening it up to everybody, and we can assess after we receive their RFQ whether they fit our needs properly or not. But I do feel strongly that the board should look at the RFQ before it goes out so we understand what's on it and what we're asking, and make sure it includes everything that we think should be on it. I do know that this is not, we're not the first district to ever do one of these, but I do think that the board should be aware of what the RFQ looks like, what it says. And the whole point of doing a subcommittee of 2 board members instead of calling another special for all 5 of us to be here to look it over is to move the process along, to make it faster.
I was just thinking it wasn't necessary because there aren't that many search firms out there. It's probably, maybe 4 or 5 search firms in California. I mean, major ones that are used. I've connected with other board members in California, and usually, you hear the same 3 or 4 firms over and over again. So it doesn't seem like there's that many that we'd have to actually vet search firms. I mean, what I'm saying is, or vet the request for qualification. I mean, we're just, a proposal would be a specifically tailored proposal. An RFQ, or request for qualifications, is just blanketly asking search firms to apply. So why not, because there aren't that many, we might as well just put out the RFQ and see what comes, and then vet them based on the proposals they put forward.
I think that the RFQ that I have seen samples of also includes things that we want to make sure that they include in their proposals back to us. Like, what kind of community involvement do you plan to, how often will you talk to the board? What's your timeline? To make sure that all of that is in our RFQ. And it sounds like you're not interested, but I am. I'd like to be on that subcommittee.
Well, I'd be happy to join you, but I see Dr. Robertson shaking her head over here. What's your feedback, Dr. Robertson?
I think it's important that the board does have, there might be some qualifications that will be important for the board for all of us. So wherever, if you talk to Mr. Velasquez or however we gather that information, I think it's important for firms that are out there to know what we're looking at, so that when you look at these, you know that they're already ready and poised to meet our needs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was just thinking, if there's only less than half a dozen firms, then, and they already have their tailor-made portfolios, that they've marketed to school districts up and down the state, then they present their portfolio, and that becomes part. This vetting process is really the interview process. That's the interview phase.
I think that if we tailor our RFQ a little more than that, we have the potential to have many of those questions answered ahead of time, so that we're not learning about it for the first time when we ask the question at an interview. If it's already in their in their proposal, I think that's a better thing. We have advance notice that they know what we want. And we're not left telling them what we want at the interview.
Well, I guess part of the problem with the vetting process is you're using a subcommittee, and board subcommittees are used, but I would object to using one with the most important decision the board can make, and that is the process for hiring a superintendent.
I think you misunderstand what the subcommittee is for. I'm proposing that the subcommittee look over the RFQ from Ms. Huezo before she puts it out. That's all. We're not going to limit who receives it. We're not going to be
saying the same thing, only different.
Yeah, may I recommend?
We're having a failure to communicate here, I think.
I'm hearing this over this side and this side.
What I would recommend is through Dr. Wessel, if the board members give the qualifications, send them over to her, and then she create the RFQ to go out and send it to each board member for approval. And then you can make recommendations to that. And you can get that done in a couple of days. If you want the subcommittee, that's another way to do it.
I think what you've proposed makes some sense, but if one board member wants something that no one else would want on there, then there's a problem, because none of the other board members have an opportunity to talk about that outside of a meeting.
It's a good point. What I'm thinking, though, but how would that work with just even a subcommittee? Would they have the...
Well, a subcommittee could make the decision on behalf of the board, and the board would have to agree that they would. If the board, at the time that the firms come forward, didn't like something that was in the RFQ, then we could change that. I'm really, how different are these RFQs going to be? What kind of qualifications are going to be? What's going to be controversial here?
That's what I'm saying.
I just want to make sure there's nothing that we feel like is left out.
I think if you went through that process, you'll find out that you're all in agreement.
I think, too, with the subcommittee, that you be part of that subcommittee to advise the board when reviewing, because I think with your expertise, you could give to the subcommittee and the board and make a better decision on which firm we want to use. That's just a suggestion.
I think this is a good segue. I actually have a chart I'd like to pass along, and this may be enough to be the basis. If you would take one and pass those along. I have enough copies to go all the way down to Ms. Huezo. And this is a chart with trust at the top, and then the two subcategories are character and competence. Mr. Sellish, would you give one to Mr. Velasquez? This may be enough for our RFQ to make sure that we've incorporated this as far as what we're looking for in the next superintendent.
I think this is taking it a step further. This may be exactly what we come up with eventually, but I think as Mr. Velasquez said, this is a couple steps down the road when we get community input and board input and staff input, that this is what we might come up with as what we're looking for, but this is not what we're looking for in a search firm. This is what we may be looking for in a superintendent.
So I guess, and I guess that begs the question. So we want to have a board discussion as to what, maybe that's the next step, is we have a board discussion as to what we're looking for in a search firm, if we're not willing to just put out a generic request for qualifications for the currently existing search firms in California or elsewhere.
Well,
my vote
would
we just
right
put out the
RFQ.
Well, I like the idea of having Ms. Huezo just send the RFQ to the board, and then we can send individual feedback. It's sort of like the facilitator. If there's consensus, then it's incorporated into the RFQ, and if there isn't, we've done that with evaluations in the past. We could do it that way, and that way everybody gets input. And so
I'm missing something.
I just don't think it's going to be an issue.
If we're looking for, right now, we're looking for a search firm. And if we're going to open it up to everybody, we make a sheet that says what we want in a search firm. Then we get all these forms back. The committee with Mr. Velasquez reviews them, makes a decision, presents it to the board, and we make the final decision which one we want to get it down to maybe 2 or 3. The total board discusses it, picks a final one, and that's the firm we go with.
Okay, so let's get back to the RFQ. It sounds like here we have some consensus then that we would like to give direction for you to create this RFQ, email it to all the board members for some feedback before you send it out. There will be no final okay of it, though, because we're not going to have another meeting. So just some feedback and then go for it. And please do forward, Ms. Hueso, your feedback and any specific firms you'd like to see receive the RFQ. Otherwise, I think we can trust Ms. Hueso to find those 5 standard firms, just like I did. And Mr. Velasquez also, perhaps you could forward some information as well.
Yeah,
Ms. Hueso.
again, a team. I'll be working with Dr. Hueso and
that'd be
acting
great.
superintendent to make sure that we're communicating with the board and that we get this done.
Sounds good. So is a week about right? Can we get this done in about a week? Okay, and then board members take a look at it for no more than a couple of days, I'm hoping, so she can get this out. And it sounds like that 5 to 10 day window, yeah, that'll be your call, will be good. And then we can come back together and either have a special or, depending on the timing when we receive responses, maybe this happens at our August regular. It depends on the timing there. So we'll wait and see on that. And it sounds like we have consensus.
When
Are
you
we ready to move?
Well, when you say this happened, I just want to go over the timeline, so if
Okay.
we could just spell that out. So today's July 20th, so the RFQ is sent to the board when and then when is it flown?
Hopefully by about the 27th, a week.
The 27th is when it's sent to the board, or by then, and then it's flown after that. So then the following week is the beginning of August. Okay. So do we want to schedule the interviews the first week of August? Of the search
I'm going to be
firms?
out of town, so that won't work for me.
If it's coming back to us on the 27th, and we have time for input and we fly it on the 1st, we have to give them, at least 5 business days. So that's a week before we can interview them. So that puts us to the 8th of August at the earliest, which is the second week. So it would have to be sometime in that second week in August that we would bring them in for interview.
Okay, so that sounds pretty close to right. I'm not looking at a calendar, but that sounds right. So
Okay, you'll
So
be
the
back
8th of
so
August.
the week of
stay
the 8th.
tuned. Yeah, stay tuned for an email for everybody to
Week of the 8th. Okay.
to schedule this.
Sounds right.
Okay.
All right. Good.
Okay, stay tuned. Then we'll get that started, and that also, again, will be a public meeting where we interview, and then to closed session, as Mr. Velasquez described. That's what my research also showed. Okay, so we're good with that. Unless there are any other comments on item C, we're about ready to adjourn to closed session. Okay, adjourn to closed session at 7:14. Thank you, everyone.